I think they just find that they have to have some other explanation. And then, I mean, it becomes whisper down the alley. That's what we say, where one person will say one thing and then they, it gets repeated and then it gets distorted and then the distortion gets repeated and it just goes on and on and on.
There's one conspiracy theory which quickly spread right round the world. It's the claim that on the morning of the attacks, 4,000 Jews stayed away from work at the World Trade Center. The suggestion is that the hijackings were either a Jewish plot to discredit the Arab world, or that the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, found out about al-Qaeda's plan and tipped off the Jewish community in New York. Cheryl Shames has good reason to know what happened. Her brother, Andrew Zucker, worked as a lawyer at the World Trade Center.
Andrew is larger than life. That's how I like to describe him. If he walked into a room of people, even if he was there maybe a minute, 2 minutes, you wouldn't forget him. It was just his presence was everywhere. He embraced Judaism, he embraced our religion, and he just loved it, he embraced it.
And on the morning of the 11th of September, he went to work as usual in the South Tower. So how did the rumor about Jews staying away that day come about? Just hours after the attacks, the Jerusalem Post newspaper reported that about 4,000 Israelis were believed to have been living or working in New York and Washington. Crucially, it didn't say they were dead or missing, just people who might have been in the vicinity of the attacks. Within days, the story had been picked up in Beirut by a satellite TV network, which is the mouthpiece for the Islamic militant group Hezbollah. Al-Manar TV put a spin on the story, reporting that 4,000 Israelis employed at the World Trade Center were absent from work that day. The story quickly spread across the Middle East and beyond, through news reports, word of mouth, and anti-Semitic websites. As it spread around the world, the conspiracy was elaborated further. The 4,000 Israelis became 4,000 Jews, who had been tipped off by Mossad. When the North Tower was hit, Andrew Zucker was in his office in the South Tower. And when they started to evacuate that building, he put others first.
Andrew stayed behind to help other people evacuate. That's what we know. He said, I'm going to do one more sweep of the office and I'll meet you down. So when the second plane hit, and my brother had to be pretty much at impact. Plenty of Jews were killed that day, and my brother was one of them. When I hear these conspiracy theories, it hurts me a lot. In general, people need a scapegoat. They need to say, this is why it happened. So I think that's why people come up with these crazy theories. People like to have someone to blame.
No one knows for certain how many Jews were killed at the World Trade Center. But our research confirms at least 119, with a further 72 victims likely to be Jewish. A total of around 200, in line with the 9% of New York's commuting population which is Jewish. Among those who understand why conspiracy theories take root are people who make a living out of telling stories.
I, not surprisingly, have thought a lot about conspiracy theories and why they're popular, because it was so much of our bread and butter on the X-Files, which I wrote for 8 years. We all tell ourselves narratives. We're all storytellers. Narratives about who we are, about who the people in our lives are, and about the world around us. We collect the information we have and we construct these narratives, and they help us make sense of what's going on. And I think we still live by these narratives, and there's religious myths we live by. But now in the modern age, particularly popular are these secular myths that are these conspiracy theories. And we assemble bits of information and tell ourselves stories. And I think the world is so complicated that conspiracy theories are very appealing because they take only a few bits of information and string them together in a way that seems logical and to certain people with a certain political or ideological bent, pleasing, in fact, because it vindicates, it justifies what you already believe.
Frank Spotnitz has now become the subject of a conspiracy theory himself because of an X-Files spin-off film that he wrote. The plot is about a hijacking which reaches its dramatic climax in the skies over Manhattan. 6 months before the 9/11 attacks, The Lone Gunmen was a primetime hit for Fox TV. In the drama, a plane departing from Boston is hijacked, but the hijack is part of a secret government plot. The act of terrorism is blamed on an anti-American dictator as a pretext for a war in the Middle East, so big bucks can be made by the US arms industry.
We're going to crash the plane into the World Trade Center.
Only this being Hollywood, disaster is averted at the very last moment.
We've got manual override.
Fast forward 6 months.
I woke up late that morning, turned on the television, and saw one of the towers of the World Trade Center on fire. And the first thought I had was the lone gunman. And it was a horrible feeling, thinking maybe this was some kind of copycat who had seen our show. We'd only been on American television 6 months earlier. It was a highly rated network broadcast.
In fact, the hijackers had been preparing for more than a year and a half, leaving a trail of security camera images at cache points across America. But the rumour started that details of the 9/11 plot had leaked out to the media, and that the team behind the X-Files had tried to give the nation a coded warning.
I began to hear that there were rumors on the internet, linking the lone gunman to the 9/11 hijacking. They were ridiculous on their face. I mean, I was there when the story was broken. I helped come up with the idea. I know the genesis of it. No one thought anything of it other than that it was an entertainment. But these theories, somehow we were preparing the population for this attack, and, people will believe the most outlandish things.
It's not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. This is the Alex Jones Show.
I like to look at the concrete evidence of 9/11 being an inside job.
Alex Jones is tapping into a rich vein of cynicism about America's leaders, even here in Bush's home state. His listeners say they can't trust the government because they've been misled before.
There are countless examples of where the American people have been lied to by their government.
There can be no whitewash at the White House.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
We know they have weapons of mass destruction. We know they have active programs. There isn't any debate about it.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
I don't believe that anybody in the United States government is a mass murderer. That, to me, is preposterous. I think, first, the shadow of Watergate, the Vietnam era, is still very, very dark in this country and in the world. And I think there's a cynicism and a hopelessness that still infects many, many people. And I think that one of our first instincts is to believe that we're being lied to now, unfortunately. And it's often borne out. We're being lied to in a million small ways. And in that environment, it's rich. It's a rich environment for conspiracy theories to sprout.
The White House is under pressure. As the president's policy on Iraq has faltered, the American public have become increasingly skeptical about anything their leaders say. 5 years on, it's no longer taboo to question the official account of 9/11. And there's one story where the evidence does stack up against the government. The FBI and CIA insist they had no specific warnings of the hijackings on 9/11. But it now seems they were less than full and frank about how much information they did have before Al-Qaeda attacked. January 2000, 2 terrorists arrive in California from the Far East. Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar were known to be active members of an Al-Qaeda cell. But it didn't arouse any suspicions when the smartly dressed young men presented their passports at immigration. Their names had not been added to the watch list for terrorist suspects. Al-Hazmi